Hello. Hey, everyone. Sorry for I sincerely apologize for starting this session very late. We today, if you're on the road today, you will see that everywhere is blocked. I think there was an accident on Lagos Ibadan Expressway, and it just is causing a whole lot of traffic everywhere. So, commuting from one place to the other, what's supposed to take like 20 minutes is taking like an hour. So I apologize. Please, thank you, and just start. Let's just get into it. You're welcome, everyone. You're welcome to Techbiz. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're having a very wonderful speaker. Because of time, I will not really want to do the usual razzmatazz I normally do, and I usually enjoy doing before I start the show. But basically, let me just get into it. Sorry, excuse me, guys. Anyways, so I was saying, yeah. So we really would like to get to meet Joy Jack. She's a co-founder, managing partner for Lab 8, and she's a wonderful person. I mean, we've followed her career for a bit now, and she's done a lot of work in the startup ecosystem. And I really would like to um, talk about what she's here to talk about today: fundraising and financial mechanisms for startups. And when we look at it, I think that funding is usually one of the biggest issues with startups, and this is actually a thing that I've seen over and over again. A lot of us packed up because they are unable to fund their endeavors and fund their operations, and it's something that has been a big issue with time since time immemorial, right? So now we've been asking ourselves questions. There are very various ways that we can be able to fund startups, and how can we do about it in an organized manner in a way that is not detrimental to you down the road? I think that's one of the reasons, one of the things that Joy will be talking today. And she's very fantastic. She's a very fantastic speaker, someone that has a lot of experience. She has helped organizations to implement investment strategies in alternative investment, private markets, debt credit, equity, corporate finance, and investment banking. And she's a specialist um, in the full investment life cycle, origination, structuring, execution, and funding within developed and developing markets. Thank you so much, Joy, for joining us. Today's Tech Biz. Someone is going to put the link to all our platforms, so please go and follow us and follow our platforms, follow our link us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and join our community on Telegram. And please just go there, ask questions, and be ready to engage our speakers after the show. So, Joy, you have the floor again. I apologize, and please, you have the floor. Take it away, please.
No worries at all. Thank you so much, Edwin, for having me here today, and the entire team for at Eco Innovation Center for reaching out to me and inviting me to join you guys in the session today. I've somehow managed to recently gone through your entire inventory of speakers, and you've always had fantastic speakers join this session. So any startup, any entrepreneur founder who is part of your community is in good hands. So thank you so much for inviting me here today. As Edwin mentioned, we are kind of looking at fundraising and financing mechanisms for startups. Every startup, every single entrepreneur company that I know talks about fundraising. I haven't seen anyone. I'm yet to meet one startup, one founder who is currently building something amazing and not talking about capital or not even thinking about it somewhere along their journey. Because fundraising or financing, capital, as some people call it, is that grease in your cogs, or say the petrol in your engine that keeps your startup moving, and very often, founders are constantly talking about how do we raise funds? What do we do to raise funds? And raising fund is not easy, especially within the African ecosystem. It's one of the most, I would say, overlooked ecosystem. Now people are beginning to notice the African ecosystem and taking advantage of, the brilliant minds in the ecosystem. But yeah, I guess, one of the first things I'd like to tackle today is, methods of fundraising, right? Do people always raise funds from investors? That's what people ask questions like, if we don't have investors, or if we don't know where to find investors, or if investors are not interested in us, or if they don't get the the vision behind our strategy or our market or our products, how do we raise funds? I do have a few ways to raise funds that I'd like to share with you. Some of them you already know. I'm sure some of you have probably explored a few of them as well. There's some that you might haven't explored, or you might haven't actually thought about or really considered as a strategy or a method to fundraise. I'd start with bootstrapping. Yes, bootstrapping is a method of fundraising. So people say, oh no, bootstrapping is using your own money and all of that. But yes, it is a method of fundraising. I've worked with founders, or I've talked to founders that saved enough money, their own personal funding, because they had an idea a few years ago and they thought, we're going to save enough money and make sure we use our own savings to launch our product, or to at least launch a minimum viable product, test the market, and if it works, then we can go out and show investors that it's worked. Typically, investors are very happy when founders have bootstrapped their product, because they know that you've got skin in the game. And there is nothing wrong with not, using your own funding to, or your own savings to bootstrap your product. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the reality is, bootstrapping is a funding method, and it doesn't, these days, in this day and age, doesn't take a lot for you to bootstrap your product. It just needs time. If you have the time to put together, learn skills, there are a lot of no-code tools out there. You don't really need to know how to develop or pay a developer or something like that. You just need to know how to market your product, how to strategize to target the right audience, and how to take time out to learn to put, together some tools, or, initial viable product, minimum viable product, to go out there. And usually when you bootstrap and save some money, you can be able to fund yourself or take care of yourself or fund your immediate needs while you're spending time doing that, more or less like paying yourself from your savings while you're out there working for free for yourself, if that makes sense. Another form of or method of funding is equity crowdfunding. There's so many equity crowdfunding, platforms now. A few years ago, there weren't that many. As at today, in fact, this month alone, March, I'm talking about the month of March, I probably talked to about 2 equity crowdfunding platforms launched in Africa, aiming to leverage the ecosystem, or the entrepreneurs within the ecosystem, and investors looking, for ways to preserve their money and make some money in return. Equity crowdfunding, it's called equity crowdfunding because you actually give equity or shares of your company for pulling funds from a crowd of people. Most equity crowdfunding have different or several requirements or criteria, due diligence, making sure your product is unique or it's attractive enough. There's several categories or criteria required for you to be approved by an equity crowdfunding platform. There's a new crowdfunding platform right now. I can't recall the name, but I'll share it with the team. And if anyone really wants to know, but they're amazing at the moment, and they're targeting early stage companies right now. You're raising 25K, 50K. That's their sweet spot. The initial funding, you need to keep it going while you build a product and test the market. The other forms of investing or fundraising or mechanism for funding your startup is angel investing, accelerator programs, venture capital, grants, aid, competitions, loans. I'm sure a lot of you heard about angel investing, right? Or angel investors. These are people who, have some money, some spare change, as we like to call it, or some reserved funds that they want to play around with, invest, or, it could be relatives, uncles, aunts, people with money, extra money anyways. And they usually invest in small, not so much volume or value, small value. And there are, angel investor networks these days all around. People pull themselves together and say, hey, I'd like to invest 20K or 50K in companies. Do you want to join me? And we can together pull our funds and invest in multiple companies. Accelerator programs are now very, very popular within the ecosystem. And quite a few good accelerator programs. I actually run one at the moment. And these accelerator programs, most of them run as venture builders. And venture builders are typically those firms that will help you build your product or build your startup, whether it's in sales or marketing or product development. They'll bring teams together to build a product. There are other types of accelerators that are purely mentorship and coaching style, where they are able to guide you through building your products and then also help you with fundraising or invest in you a small investment. Angel investors, accelerators, equity crowdfunding, all of these you'll have to pay in some way, and you pay usually via equity. Give shares from your company to these types of investors. And then, of course, we got venture capital, as I mentioned earlier, which is, a step, forward, a step further from accelerator programs. Most VCs used to be accelerators, or most VCs have accelerator programs. Like ourselves, we do have a venture capital investment vehicle, and then we've got an accelerator program. VCs typically, as you know, every startup must have heard of a venture capital firm. And it's in the name, venture and capital, companies that are just venturing out, trying something out. And there are different stages of course, VCs: early stage, growth stage, pre-seed, seed, Series A, all of those terms probably better than I do. And then grants and aids. Grants and aids are probably one of the most important methods of fundraising that you should know about. Some people understand, what it's needed for them to raise grants. I know companies that have raised funds via grants and aids and, gotten their companies to Series A or to growth stage or early growth. And what that simply means is that they're able to build their product, gain traction, get customers, validate their model or their product, and then get to a stage where they're now really, really attractive to investors. But the cool thing about grants and aids is that you don't give out any form of equity or any form of shares from your companies. You actually get free money. In a nutshell, it's free money. These are organizations that actually give grants and aids, either government organizations or foundation or charitable organizations that if you're doing something really cool, and it's not only for non-profits, by the way. A lot of people think if you run a non-profit, you can only apply for grants when you run a non-profit. No. If you're doing something really cool that meets the requirements or the criteria required by grants providers or aids providers, you will be eligible to apply for it. It is also very, very competitive because it's free money, it takes a while for it to get approved. If you're patient, you apply. It takes 3 to 6 months, sometimes longer, for it to get approved. And so one thing I say to everyone who wants to apply for grants or aids is make sure that when you start your company, you put all of your documents in order from day one, whether it's corporate certificate, financials, make sure you have all of your materials intact the same way you would provide to a venture capital investor looking to invest dollar in you for equity. right? Maybe even more organized for grants, because they usually like organized companies. They are very, very organized themselves. And because it takes a while, you just need to make sure you're prepared for any time they come back to ask for additional materials. But it's a great form for early stage companies to raise funds while trying to run their products. And then competitions. I mentioned competitions earlier. Competitions is another way to raise funds. A lot of people think, how can we raise funds via competitions? I have a partner that has raised funds via competitions in excess of $300,000. And people are like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money, because I know competitions, you don't win so much money. You probably win like 5K, 10K, 15K, at the most 25K. Because the winnings from competitions are small. So when you have someone who's winning competitions in excess of 300K, they have probably won all competitions they've been part of in their lives. Yes, he's that good. But competitions are another way for you to raise funds. And there are so many competitions out there. Every time I go online, I see just so many of them. It doesn't cost you anything to apply for it. It's just your time. And you apply, you send in your documents, and if you are one of the good companies there, they'll probably pick you to come pitch your product. And then finally, another method of fundraising is loans, right? It is a traditional form of fundraising. A lot of startups don't do loans because, and they don't even qualify for loans, because you need to have assets to be able to qualify for loans. The requirement, because it's traditional, the requirement's really, really tough to qualify for loans. But it is a traditional form. If you have asset on your own personally, as an individual, you might qualify for loans to then use for your startup or venture company. I don't know if they're allowed to ask questions at all. Are they allowed to ask questions? If not,
Of course, of course. I will also have a question, but most likely after you are finished speaking. Are you finished speaking?
no. I'm happy to take questions.
In the middle, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
They're all aware. Yeah. Someone they have to. They can ask during in the chat box, and they can be able to read about for you.
amazing. So now, given all of this list that I've mentioned on how to raise funds, and some people are like, yeah, we know all of these things. Like, how do we go about it? What are the fundraising tips? Like, strategies? How do we, talk to people? Where do we start from? What do we need to know? My advice here would be, again, don't raise money too early. Make sure that you are sure of what you're building. Before you go out talking to investors. Nobody really likes to listen to someone who doesn't know what they're doing before they come to raise fund. But the other thing is, plan your fundraising beforehand. A lot of startups make the mistake of just going online and then putting a presentation or a pitch deck together and then sending the pitch deck to everyone or applying to every program. You might be lucky, yes, someone might reach out to you and want to talk to you. But fundraising is actually planning. You need to plan well ahead of time, beforehand. The other thing is ensure that your startup is fundable. Like I always say to people, would you fund your product if you had the money, right? If you cannot give money to your own self for your product, why would someone else do it? So make sure that you've answered the question, would I fund my product? Taking sentiment out of the equation. Would I actually put money? If someone else came to me and I had the money with an idea, likely would I put money in it? Ensure that your startup's fundable. The other thing is choose your investors right. Not every investor is, supposed to be your investor, but that's not something we're going to touch today. And then another tip for fundraising is networking. It is an essential skill for a startup founder. And you need to know how to reach out to people. You need to know how to network people. And networking could be just anyone. It doesn't have to be on LinkedIn. It doesn't have to be online. Of course, LinkedIn's a great tool. Twitter is a great tool to network. It could just be on the road. talking to someone and then talking about what you're doing, and they could just know someone in their circle or their network who might find your product interesting. So yes, networking is an essential tool. And then prepared for it, just gear up for it, full commitment. It's a full-time job, to be honest. And people are like, I've got a job and I'm running my product, I'm doing this, I don't have the time, what do I do? I say to them, sleep less, right? Wake up 16 hours a day, 14 hours a day if you have to. You have to do your job, full-time job, and then also part-time run your startup, because you need full commitment to go to a place where you then can quit your job and then focus fully on your company. And I said earlier, gear up or plan, and things like that. And people say, what do you mean by gear up, or what do you mean by plan, and all of that stuff? What I mean by plan is you need to have the materials ready. When I say materials, I'm talking about your pitch deck. I'm sure if you're listening to this, you probably already know what a pitch deck is. If you don't know what a pitch deck is, it is a presentation or a document that you send out to investors to review or to potentially vet if your company is ready for investment or is an interest to them at all. It used to be, back in the day, it used to be business plan. Say 10 years, over a decade ago, when you talk to someone about business or you want to raise funds, they're like, oh, send me your business plan. But with, startup ecosystem and all of this, now people now deal with pitch decks. Matter of fact, pitch decks are actually going out of vogue. We say to startups, I said startups I'm talking to, send me executive summaries or a one-pager, because executive summaries or one-pagers are like very, very similar to pitch decks, but they're short forms of pitch decks, like highlights of your pitch decks or high-level summary of your pitch decks. And I can look at it at a glance. A lot of people, investors or stakeholders, don't have the time to look at 10, 15-page documents these days. But if you send a one-pager on the mobile phone, it has to be mobile phone friendly, PDF it. They can just take a look at it and instantly decide, is this interesting enough to ask for further materials? I like to call them assets, right? Your pitch deck, your executive summary, a video pitch also is something that's very, very important these days. I would watch a video pitch that's, say, 45 seconds to 1 minute long. And if it's straight to the point and I can capture and understand your product, it piques my interest immediately. Have that handy as well. Everyone's got a mobile phone. You can simply just, video yourself and do a video for 45 seconds or 1 minute. It shouldn't be too long at all. Something that people can watch on the go and not, spend so much time looking at it, or data, if you're in a country that cares about data. And then, of course, also have a full pitch video. If someone watches the 45 seconds video, 1 minute video, and they're happy with it, they want to watch more, you can send them a full pitch video. A product demo. So you might be asking me, what's a product demo? If you have built your product or you have an MVP, just a quick demonstration of how the product works. It could be a 1 minute video just showing how the product works. Is also a good asset to have, and just keep aside on when someone requests for it. White papers. People ask me, why are white papers necessary for startups? I do a lot of research, and as a founder yourself or an entrepreneur, you probably do a lot of research. And when you do research, papers people have written are what you call research. It's what you have access to. Those are the information you actually go to refer to and say, oh, I researched this, and you reference those researches. The white papers are very similar to that. If you write really good white papers, really good research papers about your product, and put out there online, it's very easy for people to find it when they're researching something within your sector or your industry of focus. And if it's that interesting, I can guarantee you people start reaching out to you on their own. without even you chasing them, because you've put out information that's so relevant to them that they want to understand what exactly you are putting out there in the market, and would like to support you. So white papers are, I think a must, almost a must for every startup if you're in a sector that requires a white paper. And then deal room or data room. Some people call it data room. I call it deal room. A deal room or a data room is a folder. It doesn't have to be anything special. If you use Google, you can use Google Docs or Google Drive rather. If you use Dropbox, you can use Dropbox. If you use Microsoft, you can. There are so many cloud friendly folders these days where you can create and share links, making the links all accessible to anyone you share it to. And in this deal room, you can have all of these materials I've just mentioned: your pitch deck, your videos, your product demo, your white paper, other things like your financials, your marketing strategy. I can share a list of this later, and you can get it from the team at the Co-Innovation Center. And your deal room is that place where you go to update regularly. Every time you get a feedback, you go back and you update materials, and that's where you're able to share materials to people when they ask for further information about your product. These are really important list of things to focus on or to keep. I call them assets because they are really assets. If you're a startup, early stage, no customer or very little traction, these are your assets. What you spent time, effort to put together, to let people know that investing in your company is worth it. It is an asset. There are also so many, investor links that you can use to fundraise. If you go online and you Google Visible or Signal, LinkedIn also, even Google search, you'd find a lot of investors. The other thing to do when preparing to fundraise is creating a list of everyone you've talked to. So if you've talked to, say, a Co-Innovation Center, for example, you add them to your list. If you've talked to me, add me to your list. Create just a simple Excel sheet. Call it your investor CRM, for example. And as you talk to people, whether they say yes or no, just add them to that list and categorize them. Leave comments on who has said yes, who has said no. The reason for this list is if I don't believe in your business today, doesn't mean I won't believe in your business tomorrow. But the other reason for this list is as you kind of start, getting or making progress in your startup journey, you want to be able to reach out to all of these people you've had on the list and give them updates. No commitment kind of update. You're not expecting them to come back to you to say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. It's just an update. No strings attached, strings-free updates on what's happening with your company. It is a fundraising mechanism or fundraising method, to be honest, because if I receive an email from you today about some status update on your company, I may not be able to help, but I might have talked to somebody who's looking at your industry, your sector, or looking for startups within your space. And I could quickly do an email to say, hey, I know a company who's doing this and that. Would you like to talk to them? Here is their information. It's a circle, it goes round. So the more people you have within your network is really important. I'm going to take a pause here now and see if anyone has any questions, so I'm not talking too much. And I also like to see how much time I've got left. I think you're on mute.
You still have about 15, 20 minutes if you still want to talk.
Okay.
I mean, we're here for you.
Yeah.
This is very interesting what you've been saying. I like what you've been saying about um, funding strategies, and I think I learned a few things. I never knew that actually going for competitions was a thing. I mean, I see the competitions everywhere, but I never actually thought about it. Like, wait, really, if you are that good and you just go about applying for competitions and you just win like 5, 10, 5K here, 10K here, 20K here. Before you know it, you had like a whole portfolio of funds. And that's actually something I've learned today. So yeah, please carry on.
Amazing. And the other thing is that you get better, the more
Yeah,
you
yeah.
to people
Although
and,
maybe,
get back.
maybe it might be like just casinos at some point. It will be like, oh, this guy's coming again. Don't let him in.
Yeah,
Because it's just going to
yeah,
become a win.
absolutely. Yeah, you get
Yeah,
better and you also promote your company to an extent. You're actually out there and people are
yeah,
talking about you. You get press releases and things like that. And when
yeah.
people Google
True.
you and your company, they actually see you, that you've been out there trying to, do some good out there with your product.
Yeah.
Um, Another fundraising activity I would like to share is, prior to kind of looking at several fundraising activities, I'll go back to putting a list of people you're talking to together and seeing what you want to do with them. Again, when you have a list of people you want to talk to, it's really, really easy to send them emails and say, this is what we're doing here. But the thing is, some people say, what kind of email do I send to them? Do I just send them an email saying, hey, I'm fundraising, or this is what's happened in my company? Uh, the answer is yes and no. I usually say to startups to actually have a script, a format on how they'd like to inform advisors, investors, stakeholders, or just anyone really, customers, anyone. If I'm not a customer today, I could be a customer tomorrow. If I'm not an investor, I could be a customer. I could be a partner, really. I could be working with a company who is looking for partnership with another company in your space or your sector, or you're doing something interesting that I think is partnerable with someone else. I can make that introduction. And so your email should go out at least, say, maybe once every month initially, or say once every 3 weeks or once every 5 weeks, depending on how you think. But prior to that, the only way you can fill out an email, the only way you can have stuff to write in an email is on your own. Every week, take a pause and write down what you've achieved for your company or your startup that week. What have you achieved? You're not sending this to anyone, you're just keeping it down. You put it down, pen and paper, on a jotter, a diary, whatever it is. What did you struggle with? What challenges did you have to go through with your company that week? If you're at a stage where you've already got team members, like, do you have a new team member? Did you fire someone? Did you lose a developer, for example? I know developers are people who up and quit every day in the African ecosystem. I hear is a thing. So did your developer up and leave? Your highlights. What were the highlights of the company that week? Did you guys sign a new partnership with somebody? And then, talk about what you want, what you're looking for. It's not every time you send an email out to an investor, you're talking about raising funds, or you send an email out to a group of people, you're talking about raising funds. You might need something else. You might need someone who has a developer within the network with, say, JavaScript skill set, or Node.js skill set. You put it down there. You might be looking for partnership with, I don't know, GT Bank. If you're a fintech company, say we're looking for partnership with GT Bank to provide us with this. If you know anyone in GT Bank, please make an introduction for us. You might be looking for someone who can introduce you to NYC candidates for internships in your company. And so I say to startups to kind of, make sure that the weekly or monthly or, annual or bi-weekly updates has a very structured format where they're not just saying, this is what we've done, we need money. No, you talk about what you've done, you talk about the good things that have been happening, the bad things, you even say thank you to the people who have helped you the last time. Remember, when you do this consistently, there are people who are going to be helping you. And so you say thanks to those people and make sure everyone else sees. Hey, I'd like to give a shout out to Edwin. who introduced us to GT Bank last week. He's done very well. We want to say thank you to him. People like to see their names, on materials like this where you appreciate them, and with that, they'll always want to even help you better. So that's another method of fundraising, because as you do this, I forget what the name is, but it is almost like a chain. Word goes around your startup, your name starts to resonate with people. What you do starts to resonate with people. And when they're out and about in their everyday life, and they see something that's valuable to you, it's very easy for you or your startup name to resonate and click back and say, yes, that company is trying to do this. So yes, that's another way to fundraise. And people, in fact, when people introduce you to an investor, whether an angel investor or a VC investor, it's a lot easier for you to raise funds that way than you going directly. I'm not saying it's hard to go directly. I'm just saying, as I always say, a warm introduction is always so much quicker and better than a cold introduction. The other thing is about fundraising, or activities, I should say, for fundraising, is something called pre-fundraise. I say to people, have you heard about pre-fundraise? And they're like, no, we've never heard about pre-fundraise. But you've probably heard about pre-launch. Pre-launch is the time before you launch a product. And there are so many other pre's you've heard about. Pre-fundraise is pretty much like, pre-launch, before you fundraise, the time before you fundraise. What do you do before you fundraise, right? I usually say to founders to do something I call testing the waters, right? You probably know what testing the waters is. And in this case, testing the waters, I mean personal outreach, testing the waters, reaching out to people, just randomly hearing what they have to say. I see now a lot of this on LinkedIn, and people add me on LinkedIn, and when I look at their profile, they have something on their profile called stealth startup. So they're not putting the name of the startup there. They're not putting the name of the product or what they're doing in stealth startup mode. Just simply means something coming up. Something's just in a stealth mode, but it's coming up. And when I have chats with them, they're just regular conversations. They're not asking me for anything. They're just trying to see my opinion. Like, oh yeah, we're doing this thing. We think we're going to launch soon, but just wanted to get your advice and your opinion. And usually when they send me those messages, it's the same thing. They're like, oh, hey, we're just adding you on LinkedIn. We're doing something important and interesting. Just wanted to get your advice, opinion on this if you have 5 minutes or 15 minutes. And you don't go into these conversations asking for money or asking for introductions. You're going into these conversations just to collect data and collect contact information. Because when you talk to this person and they give you their opinion, it's information that you walk away with, data that you walk away with and go and add to the information you already have. You've collected someone's name, someone's phone number, and you have someone to add to your CRM of people to email when you're ready to launch, right? Or ready to fundraise. And pre-fundraise is usually, I say to startups to do pre-fundraise or even pre-launch, say 1 to 2 months before they're ready to fundraise or pre-launch, because that way, when you talk to people, if you spend time actually talking to people, just getting people's opinions and understanding what they're thinking about or looking for, you'll probably be able to get at least 100 to 200 names within that time frame in your CRM. And so when you launch, you have a bunch of people on your list to send out information to just say, hey, we've launched and we're raising funds. This is our product. This is where we are. We talked to some of you at this time and you gave us some valuable advice. We were able to implement these advice and, take a look at our product and give us a call or reach out to us if you think you can help us here, here, and here. So pre-fundraise or pre-launch is really, really important for startups trying to raise funds. I say startup, if you just go out in the market, just log on to LinkedIn or Twitter and start Googling names and saying VCs in Africa or VCs looking at Africa, and you get a bunch of names and start applying to the fund. You will be so overwhelmed by the disappointments you get, because you haven't done enough. You haven't prepared yourself enough for yes and no. You haven't talked to people enough to know what the market's looking for or what they're expecting from you. And that can be really disappointing and overwhelming for any startup. Another thing to look at when raising fund is investors fit. I mentioned that earlier, and I said I'll come back to it. Make sure you have the right investor fit. If you're a fintech company and you reach out to an investor who invests in marketplace, it's an instant no. They're not even going to look at your pitch deck. Why? Because their focus is marketplace, not fintech, right? And there's something we call investors' thesis or investment thesis. And every single investor has these investment theses on their website or their LinkedIn page. So if you go on there, they write, we invest in early stage companies between pre-seed and seed, and that are focused on consumer goods or ag tech or fintech. Like, they actually tell you specifically what they focus on. Of course, there are those investors that are agnostic, and by that I mean they can invest in anything. But the larger investors are usually sector focused because they have specific skill set to focus on a specific sector. So do your research and make sure you're pitching or reaching out to the right people within your sector of focus or your industry focus, to make sure that you're not wasting your time reaching out to the wrong people. Because when you get no, everyone reacts to no the same way, right? If you get no like 10 times in one day, of course, that's going to demoralize you. That's going to weigh you down. That's going to kill your momentum. So make sure that you're talking to the right people who would at least take the time to look at your pitch deck and give you some feedback, even if they're not interested to invest in your product or your company. As you kind of go on in the journey of your startup and fundraise, there are tools that you can leverage to keep you organized. I mentioned Dropbox as a folder for data room, Google Drive, Microsoft Cloud Services, and a few other ones. I also mentioned that you'll be sending out these emails, but what I didn't mention is that as you kind of grow your email list, you would eventually not do it directly via email. And I forgot to also mention, when you're sending out mass email to people, don't CC everybody, right? Make sure that everyone is on blind carbon copy or BCC, because you piss people off when you CC them all. And, if you heard of something called GDPR, right? A lot of people like their privacy and they don't want to be in an email where people click on reply and they're getting constant replies from everybody on that email, right? So make sure you BCC everyone. And if BCC gets difficult, of course, you do BCC on email when you're sending emails to like 10, 15, 20 people. But once your list starts to grow and get bigger, you want to leverage tools like, MailChimp and other similar tools like that as well. SendGrid, MailChimp. These are usually free for startups to an extent. I think for MailChimp, up to 2,000 contacts, you can send emails using MailChimp. But not only is MailChimp good for keeping investors or stakeholders' emails private, it's also very organized in the way you layer out or prepare your emails in terms of templates and the information you share and all of that stuff. It helps you get organized as well. In terms of your deal room, as I mentioned earlier, your data room, I will be able to share information with regards to what your data room or deal room should look like, what kind of folders you should create and subfolders you should create. The key is being organized, right? In everything in life we do, whether it's fundraising, whether it's building a product, whether it's creating or running a team. If you're in a place where you currently have a team of 2-3 people, the key there is being organized. If you guys are not organized, if you don't have the resources and tools to get yourself organized, and there's so many free resources and tools these days. If you Google free startup resource and tools, you see it online. Once you are organized, it's a lot much better when you start reaching out to people. As I mentioned, don't just go out and reach out to people. Make sure you put yourself together first. Create those drives, the CRMs, your pitch, your video, all of that stuff. Make sure that these are all put together and in order before you start talking to investors. I'll close off the session by just sharing a few more techniques and mechanisms for startups. One of the mechanisms, or I say 3, one would be before pitching, right? Before you pitch your startups or fundraising. As I mentioned earlier, get your startups or your companies onto investors' radars pre-pitching before you pitch. One way to do that is joining accelerators or incubators. And usually they're able to somewhat market you or promote you to the investors network before you get ready to raise funds. Another one would be hire in connections and advisors, right? Hiring advisors are free, to be honest. If you look for advisors online that have several connections, you hire them. You might be able to pay them something at some point when you raise funds, and obviously schedule or do a contract with them to say, when we raise, we'll be able to, compensate you in this way or that way, or maybe some small equity, advisors equity as they call it. But advisors usually are able to kind of put you out there in front of investors. Matter of fact, these days, a lot of investments, even ourselves, investments that we've done are all from referrals from advisors of companies that they work with, and that trust factor when advisors introduce you to investors usually carries a lot of weight. Control your burn, right? When you're going to raise funds, don't go and pitch that you want to spend 40% or 50% or 100% of your money to market and bring in customers. No, that's unrealistic burn rate. Make sure that you control your burn rate, your financials, and all of that shows really what you're going to use your funds for. If you came to me and said, I'd like to raise 150K, and I said, what are you going to use it for? And you say, I would use 100K for marketing. That, to me, you're not ready to raise funds because you haven't really figured out how you want to spend the money yet. If you're going to use nearly all of the money for marketing.
Sorry, I have a question now and that. So what if I have a startup? I figured everything out. I figured out my team. I figured out my structure, my go-to-market strategy, done everything, and all I just need is like money to. I'm actually seeing a scenario where money to market is what I really need.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's possible. Like I could have, like I could have a well-structured company, team, everything, but I don't have the tools. I know that if I invest like say $10,000 in a particular marketing plan, I'm expected to get about. Oh, sorry. Let's say currently I'm doing about $10,000 in marketing spend, and I'm getting about say $50,000 back in revenue. But then I want to go to 1 million because I'm competing with someone, right, who is probably just as funded or more funded than I am, and I need to capture the market as fast as he does. And I'm saying that, okay, look, I don't really need money. If this guy did not exist, I probably would not have raised money. But really, when I want to raise money now, all I need is just to really drive my marketing. Is that not a scenario that might happen?
Yes, it is a scenario that might happen. The reality of that is that if you're in a place where you have already raised initial funding, or maybe even without raising initial funding, but you do have some traction and you have spent money on marketing already, and you can show. Usually investors ask you if you need money for marketing, say you need $10,000 or $20,000 for marketing. What's your current customer acquisition rate? Is what they
Yeah.
ask you, right? And you tell them what your current customer acquisition rate. That simply shows that you have already done it. You're able to show evidence that $5 is going to get you 5 customers, for example, right? And you say yes. So if I spend $5,000, I'll be able to get 50,000 customers, and 50,000 customers are going to give me 500K in revenue. Now, that is information. That's data that you can share with an investor. But if you haven't tested marketing before, and you just believe that as a startup, if I spend $20,000, $10,000 in marketing, I will get 10,000 customers. There is no data to actually show that, right? And the other thing is, you don't just raise money purely for marketing. You actually raise money for marketing and other things, because there are mistakes a lot of people make in marketing, especially early stage companies, where they, direct all their marketing funds to, Google and Facebook and, all of that stuff. And a lot of the time, this doesn't work as much if you don't have a marketing strategy. If you say to me you want to raise only $10,000, and you're able to show to me data, how $10,000 will get you 100 customers or 1,000 paying customers that would then lead to 100K in revenue, I would want to see some hard facts on how that plays out, right? I'd want to see that you've done this before, you've tried and you've tested this before and it's worked. I would also want to see a proper strategy in place, like what strategy do you have to show me that this will not flop. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Very, very much for your presentation. I want to just run through the questions because I think we have a bunch of them. Someone wants to know. First of all, do you invest?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So someone wants to know if they have networks or links to possible African Nigerian funding, and if you can them to if you can connect them to investors across Africa. Is it possible?
Absolutely. I mean, if I believe that you have a product that's worth introducing to investors, I'd be more than happy to do that. The other thing is, I will be able to share links with you where you can find some of these information yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. Awesome. So someone is asking, what's the Series A and Series B funded?
Series A, Series B are growth stage funding. So over time, I think with startups raising funds over and over, the industry or the ecosystem of startups have come up with several stages of funds. There used to only be early stage, growth stage, and late stage, right, in the past. But now I think people are now raising several early stage funding. So now we've got, pre-Series A, we've even got pre-seed. First starts with pre-seed. Pre-seed is, when you have an idea, you've tested the market, or you're trying to get, better market understanding or validation, maybe perfect your MVP, get more customers. You kind of raise a pre-seed fund. Usually that ranges anything from, say, 50K up to, 150, 200, 300K, or even more, depending on your sector as well. And then from there, you got the, seed stage, which, is a step from there. You've got some customers, you're looking to scale, and you're raising your seed to get to the next level. You raise a seed round, which kind of ranges between 300K and above, maybe up onto $1 million for some ecosystems and some sectors. And then you get to your Series A. Now, recently they've also added a pre-Series A round, right? This is where you've gone past your pre-seed, seed, yeah, and then you get to your pre-Series A, because you don't want to, because a lot of these terms comes with certain hurdles as well. You don't want to get to that stage where you're seen as a growth stage company yet, or something
Yeah.
else.
So sorry, because I
Yeah.
want to ask you, are this Series A, Series B, are they the same across? Is there a particular metric for measuring it, or is it just I can just pick up a money and say, this is my Series A, this is my Series B, this is my Series C, or
No, no, you have to
is
get
there a
there.
particular
Your
metric
company has to
to
grow
say
up
Series
to
A?
up to that level. You have to kind of go from pre-seed, seed, even idea stage, pre-seed, seed,
Yeah.
pre-series A, if you like, series A, and then series B, series E. There are even up to series E, series F, and
Mm,
these are way later stage companies that probably IPO'd and they're raising. So the more every round you raise, you kind of have a
mhm.
term for it. So you raise your first round, could be pre-seed round. You raise the next round, that could be your seed round. The next
Yeah.
round can be your series round, and then the series kind of
There's
goes
a
A, B,
sorry,
C.
there's a run they call a bridge. Is that if I'm correct? If I'm correct or wrong? Is it particular one they call a bridge round or something?
Yes, there is a bridge round as well,
Okay.
but all of these terms really depends on where the company is. Again,
Okay.
sector-wise, valuation. There are certain factors internally and externally that
Yeah.
determine what rounds you're raising.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're out of time now. Again, thank you so much for your time. I've really listened and really enjoyed what you had to say. You said you're going to send something to us that we can share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send some materials.
Okay,
And
cool.
free to share these materials.
Oh, awesome. So we can just share, we will share it we will share it in our newsletter if you don't mind.
Amazing, amazing.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you've done. So, we've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much, Joy. You've been so wonderful. You've been so eloquent, and you've been so helpful to us. And I really appreciate what you are doing. And hopefully, I'm sure there are a lot of guys that are here that are listening to you. I will really want to engage you and see how they can raise funding from you. But what we do is I will collect those numbers and we'll get them to get across to you since we already have your email with us. We can just share them with you so you don't have to be inundated with so many pitch decks. Thank you so much. So thank you everybody. We've come to the end of the show. Please make sure you join us again next week Thursday. So we'll bring you another speaker and another topic and another nice time here to learn, to grow, and to scale your business here at Techbiz. Thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks,
Hi, bye
everyone.
everyone.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.